All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're unpacking the sudden, honestly pretty dramatic collapse of the highly anticipated Trainspotting musical. If you follow West End theater, you're well aware that big adaptations come with huge expectations. But it's actually super rare to see a massive production unravel this quickly. Today, we're going to dig into the data, the brutal reviews, and some juicy behind-the-scenes leaks to figure out exactly what went wrong. So here's the million-dollar question for today. How on earth does an iconic, universally beloved story crash so spectacularly on the stage? Trainspotting wasn't just a book or a movie, right? It was a massive cultural phenomenon that really defined that gritty 90s era. Taking that intense, drug-fueled realism and dropping it into a theater setting with singing and dancing, well, that was always going to be a massive high-wire act.
The timeline of the production is literally staggering. Previews kicked off at the Theatre Royal Haymarket on July 15, 2026. Official opening night, July 22nd. And then, by August 3rd, the entire expansive UK tour was totally scrapped. That is a stunningly rapid sequence of events in the theater world. I mean, usually tours are locked in months or even years in advance.
And it's wild when you consider the stark contrast between the massive critical and commercial success of the original movie and the grim reality of the 2026 stage adaptation. The '96 film with Ewan McGregor was the highest-grossing UK film of that year. It won a BAFTA. Fast forward 30 years, and the musical is getting universally panned and abruptly canceled. It's a pretty sobering reminder that a prestigious legacy definitely doesn't guarantee a hit in a new medium.
Section 1, the West End hype. Believe it or not, leading up to the summer of 2026, the anticipation for this was absolutely off the charts.
On opening night, the cast enthusiastically described their show using these exact words. Gallus is this fantastic Scottish term. It means bold, daring, maybe even a little cheeky. And by calling it an anti-musical, the team was clearly trying to signal to audiences, hey, you're not getting traditional jazz hands here. They genuinely wanted to preserve the raw, abrasive spirit of the original material.
And the pedigree was absolutely there on paper. The original creator, Irvin Welsh himself, returned to co-write the music and lyrics alongside Stephen McGuinness, developing it with director Caroline J. Ranger. The premise was super ambitious, catching up with iconic characters like Renton, Sick Boy, Spud, and Begbie 3 full decades after the original film. It wasn't just a rehash, it was a continuation. But unfortunately, that massive ambition pretty much hit a brick wall.
Which brings us to Section 2. A critical bloodbath, because when the press embargo lifted after opening night, the reviews weren't just mixed, they were downright hostile. Let's look at what they had to say.
The New York Times absolutely didn't hold back. For a musical, having your score branded as instantly forgettable is probably the most fatal blow a critic can deliver, right? The music is the engine of the show. If it fails to leave a mark, the whole thing just stalls out.
Then The Guardian went a step further. They aggressively questioned why this dark, gritty IP was being mutated into a stage franchise in the first place, essentially arguing that just because a story can keep mutating into different forms definitely doesn't mean it should. It really brings up a fascinating question about where we actually draw the line on milking 90s nostalgia. And then, the stage delivered this devastating one-word summary that pretty much echoed across all the major publications. When industry staples call a production pointless, it signals to regular theatergoers that their hard-earned cash is way better spent elsewhere. And spoiler alert, the audiences absolutely listened.
So the crucial thing to understand here is that the failure wasn't just in one specific area. The Telegraph called the score diluted. London theaters slammed the visual design as boxy. But perhaps most damningly, audiences, including a bunch of people sounding off on Reddit, noted that the pre-existing songs just felt completely disjointed. Instead of driving the narrative forward, the music kind of just felt like weird punctuation, interrupting a play.
Moving to Section 3, the financial reality. Because bad reviews are one thing, but it was the economic reality that actually forced the closure. 19%. That was the incredibly dire reported ticket sales for the tour's planned stop in Edinburgh. Edinburgh, the very home of the Trainspotting story. Think about that for a second. If you literally cannot sell tickets in the hometown of your source material, your chore is in profound trouble.
There was this remarkably candid, leaked quote from the production's resident director that just perfectly captures the behind-the-scenes despair. This popped up on social media as the tour dates were quietly being scrubbed from ticketing websites. It's a really rare, unfiltered glimpse into that stark realization that the show was just financially unviable.
And it wasn't just a lack of local interest. The producers directly blamed compounding issues, like lower overall sales and a seriously tough economic climate for touring. Even aggressive promos, like pushing highly discounted 15-pound rush tickets onto Daytix, just couldn't fill the seats. When the producers officially cited the current economic climate in their cancellation statement, they were pointing to a much larger issue beyond just one bad show.
This actually lines perfectly with independent data. Regional touring is facing immense systemic financial pressure right now. A recent independent review highlighted a huge drop in play touring nationwide. So while Trainspotting the musical obviously suffered from its own creative missteps, it also launched into an incredibly unforgiving environment where audiences are just way more selective about their entertainment budgets. Finally, Section 4, Lessons and Updates. What can we actually learn from all of this? Ultimately, this explainer shows us that nostalgia isn't bulletproof. Just because an intellectual property is iconic, or just because you have the original author attached, absolutely does not mean a musical adaptation will work. Forcing a gritty, drug-addicted narrative into a format where people burst into song, that is an inherently risky tightrope walk. And right now, if a show stumbles on that tightrope, the economic safety net of the UK touring market simply isn't there to catch it. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on stories exactly like this one, definitely head over to londoner.news today. You can read their full deep dive on this specific story by visiting londoner.news/trainspotting-musical-tour-cancelled. So, as we wrap up, I'll leave you with this. As producers keep mining our favorite 90s movies for stage adaptations, is this catastrophic failure going to be a warning sign they finally heed, or just a speed bump in the relentless pursuit of nostalgia? Thanks for joining.